Hello, this is your host Todd Lewis. I'm here joined by Master Sanders, and we're starting a new series called The Consistent Application of Biblical Principles. And to kick off this series, we're going to start with the principle or concept of church government. Separate yourselves, said he, from the tents of the wicked and hardened men, and touch not those things which belong to them, lest ye perish together in their sins. On which account a people obedient to the Lord's precepts and fearing God ought to separate themselves from a sinful prelate, and not associate themselves with the sacrifices of a sacrilegious priest, especially since they themselves have the power of either choosing worthy priests or rejecting unworthy ones. That right there is one of the clearest enunciations of congregationalism you're ever going to read. The people can promote and demote an unworthy bishop. And this is from Cyprian, who is often touted by the Catholic Church as an arch-episcopalian. So again, this just shows that to be deep in history is to cease to be Catholic. They just have this fairy tale history that this stuff gets whitewashed away. Hello, this is Todd Lewis, the host of the Praise of Folly podcast. This is my fifth debate. Tonight I'm joined by Ghost of Buckley. And we're going to debate Catholic worship, icons, Mary, the saints, typical fissure lines between Protestants and Catholics. Mm-hmm. So how do you want to start off first? In the classic section on excommunication, Matthew 18, beginning in verse 15, moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault before you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. But if he will not hear, take with you one or two more, but by the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. The other aspect here we have to ask ourselves is looking at the whole corpus of Scripture. Does God want power to be centralized in the hands of a few, or does he want power to be distributed amongst many people? Well, when we see God's first direct, detailed revelation to his people, the law of Moses, what do we find? We find that the centralization of wealth, which is a form of power, is short-circuited with the prohibition of usury and the land redistribution laws and the Sabbath and the Jubilee years. So one of the complaints of wealth inequality and wealth centralization that many on the left have is already addressed in the law of Moses. God clearly saw the threat of a highly focused concentration of wealth in the hands of an oligarch. Furthermore, we see that the rules of the ruler, how was Israel ruled after Moses? It was primarily ruled initially by judges, which were men. In the case of Deborah, a woman who was chosen by God through their charismatic gifts to lead Israel to victory against its enemies. Now again, chosen by God. Now when they choose a king, they want a king like all the other nations. And what does God tell Samuel? First thing, they have rejected me. So let's remember that a monarchy is a rejection of God. This is interesting. So in the 90s, there was a revival of In His Steps, the book which inspired WWJD. And of course, amongst Protestant evangelicals and fundamentalists, the discussion is, well, what would Jesus do? Well, apparently they never thought to ask, what would Jesus do when it came to missions? Because if you read Mark chapter 7, beginning in verse 24, you find a very interesting view of missions. From there he arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon. He entered a house and wanted no one to know it. He could not be hidden, for a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, Syro-Phoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. Then he said to her, for this saying, go your way, the demon has gone out of your daughter. And then when she had come to her house, she had found the demon gone out, and her daughter lying on the bed. Now, what is interesting about this? Well, a lot of things. First of all, who are the children? The children of the Jews. Jesus' ethnic relations. They come first in the priority of missions. And he says, look, he literally calls her a dog, which is equivalent to any number of racial epithets today. So this is like not a light insult. This is about as bad as it gets. Calling someone a dog was fighting words back in antiquity. And so, the Jews first hear the gospel and are serviced by Christ. And then afterwards, the Gentiles are witnessed to. Now, she showed great faith. And so Christ made an exception, right? This isn't a hard and fast rule. To sort of paraphrase Pirates of the Caribbean, it's kind of like guidelines. There are some cases in which you can bend it a little bit. And the other aspect is he uses an extreme racial epithet. Modern day culture and modern day Christianity views racial epithets the way we used to view blasphemously using the name of God. To blaspheme the black man is a greater sin than to blaspheme God himself.